Panels noticing on what the proposition side of the house is offering you is the world where women can love themselves more without depending on the high beauty standards that are created by the K-pop industry. Their goal is to present the beauty as what it is and with no certain standard that are being glorified by the society. But they never really mention on how they are going to actively oppose this K-pop industry. Okay, they say that they want to erasing this kind of video ads or interview that present the beauty standard is like the K-pop artists, right? And etc. But they never really explain to us on how with that they can ensure that people are going to have this kind of mindset that beauty standards are never exist. Seeing on how their mechanism is actually not that clear, ladies and gentlemen, let's assume that they are just going to encourage people through social media and etc. But ladies and gentlemen, they actually already stated by themselves that they agreed in that in the status quo this kind of issue is actually already progressing. Yes, we agree with that, but it is still not enough. But I think their mechanism is actually will not change anything because it is just the same as what already be implemented in the status quo, which they agree that it's not enough yet. Even though they say that they are going to support this movement more actively or more aggressively, actually, they're just going to harm the feminist community. And this is why feminist is seen as a radical community. Because actually, what we need to oppose is not the idea of K-pop industry itself, but the idea of people's mindsets itself, which I will explain more later on. Panels, if we can prove that we can give better mechanism to create a world where certain beauty standards is never exist, so women can love themselves more and we believe that their proposal is not exclusive and not necessary, so they cannot win this debate. Now, before moving on to my arguments, I'm going to clarify a point before moving on to my argument. First, on what the problem is, on what the problem in this debate is actually, and how we're going to solve it. Panels, in this case, we believe that feminists exist to fight the idea of something that harmful for the women, right? And in this case, we're talking about on how the beauty standards that are being created by the K-pop industry that make the women so stressful and make the society have or glorifying these toxic beauty standards, right? So the problem in this debate is actually not the problem in this debate is actually not the K-pop industry, but the beauty standard itself, right? And because of we're talking about the beauty standard in the society is actually not just come from the K-pop industry, and beauty standard is in each point of view is very various and relative, which I will explain more in my arguments. So instead of actively opposing this kind of K-pop industry, our house is going to create the mindset in the society that beauty standard is actually not a certain standard to define your prettiness. So compared to the proposition team, we're going to be more focused on each women individuals rather than try to oppose something that we can't control at the very first place. I will explain more my mechanism more on my second argument. Now moving on to my argument, I'm going to bring first why it is unjustifiable to actively oppose the K-pop industry, and second I will bring on how we're going to create a better world with our mechanism. Now, why it is unjustifiable? Panels noticing on how beauty definition is actually very complex and relative, right? So some people have their own beauty standards that are being created by themselves. Like we can see in Indonesia, people think that beauty is white skin, skinny body like K-pop artists and etc. Or big eyes like most people in Western countries, and or like how people in Western country is they see beauty as they define their beautiness is like have a tan skin, curly hair, and etc. So actually, beauty standards are things that are very, very complex, ladies and gentlemen, and not just come from the K-pop industry. This is the things that are missing out and misunderstood by the proposition, right? And it is impossible if we're trying to oppose everything that create a toxic beauty standard, right? because at the end of the day, beauty standard is something that will never end. It's like a never-ending circle, ladies and gentlemen. And if the proposition side of the house is trying to oppose the K-pop industry, and it is ridiculous if we're trying to oppose anything, right? Because it's a never-ending circle, and so instead of we're trying to oppose something that we can control, I think it is better for us to create a movement that campaigning about how the beautifulness is actually very various and can't be defined by a certain standard. Now moving on to my second argument on how we're going to create a better world with our mechanism. Panels noticing on how the characteristic of beauty standard itself that actually happened in the status quo, our house is here to prove to you on how we're going to offer a better solution. Instead of creating the movement of actively opposing the K-pop industry, we are here to, as the feminists, it's going to create a movement on how the beauty standard is actually just a never-ending circle and cannot define each woman's prettiness. This movement will be implemented through campaign on social media, because seeing on how impactful social media is to influence the people's mindset, right? And our house is going to be more focused on how women define themselves, and the goal of our mechanism is to boost the self-love of women and help them to realize that their own beautifulness instead of depending on certain standards. Comparing to the proposition side of the house, they will never reach their own goal with their mechanism, because somehow with that mechanism they kind of blame this K-pop industry for creating this kind of beauty standard. Besides, beauty standard is actually created by our own self, right? And realizing on how the beauty standard is a never-ending circle and very various and complex based on each individual's perspective, our house believes that our mechanism is more implementable to the society and more realistic to be implemented to the women and the society. Because once we can build the self-esteem on the individual, no matter how many beauty standards or how long this kind of beauty standards is being thrown by the society, or wherever this beauty standard are come from, it will not be a problem at the end of the day, because from the start our movement is to create a better self-esteem and realize on how they realize their beauty, each women realize their own beautifulness. So until the end of this debate, still so proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.